back when I decided I wanted to make my first record, John Keel and I decided to approach Hank O'Neill, who owned Chiaroscuro Records, which was, at the time, one of my favorite labels. They had recorded Dave McKenna and Zoot Sims. Anyhow, last week we talked with John Bates, who ran that whole label for Hank, and we talked about how to get Hank on the podcast, and lo and behold, we've got him. He talks a lot about his work recording people and the famous people he's recorded, and in this section, we talk a lot about the jazz cruises, and it's really, really interesting. He's a fascinating guy, and it's only part 1 of 2. So thanks for joining, and I hope you like it. And welcome back to another episode of The Stereo Image. This week, we're so lucky to be talking to my mentor and friend, Hank O'Neill, who I've known for going on 30-some years now. And Hank is a fascinating, incredible character who has done a lot in his life. Welcome aboard, Hank. It's great to see you in person.
Good to be here. Good to be anywhere.
This is true. Well, I want to say I'm trying to remember. I've known you, I believe, since about 1988 or 1989,
or 1947, a long time ago.
That's true. That's true. I don't even remember those years. It's almost like they happened to someone else. So you, I came to know you, of course, through the label Chiaroscuro, and because you had recorded a bunch of friends of mine and a bunch of people that I admired. I would consider you a Renaissance man. You're deeply into the world of photography and music, 2 of my favorite things. As the owner of Chiaroscuro Records and founder, and a great photographer that studied with Bernice Abbott. And when did you start the label? Let's just start there, because it's a lot of stories and a lot of great stuff, and I just want to sort of organize it a little bit. When did you decide that the music business was a great idea?
Well, I never decided that the music business was a great idea. I decided that the music was a great idea, but the business angle has never been, the most lucrative thing in the world. But the record company that became Chiaroscuro evolved as a 3-way partnership that began in the late 1960s, about 1968 or 69. And the partnership was Marion McPartland, the wonderful pianist, Sherman Fairchild, the noted industrialist, a name that is not as well known today as it should be, and myself, because it turned out that Sherman had a recording studio in his home, home in New York City, and I used to see him on government business, and Marion had been seeing him on personal, we all like piano players kind of business. Sherman was somebody who loved pianists, had 2 Max Steinway L's in his living room, and at his home in the country, he had Jerome Kern's Steinway. And and of course, some of the equipment in his recording studio, he had made himself.
Right.
He had Fairchild Recording Products that he started in 1932. Anyway, we had a 3-way partnership, and we had one record that Marion had already made. In late 1969, we sort of formalized it, and we were all 3-way partners. And the very first record that we recorded that eventually came out was by a man named Bobby Henderson, who very few people remember these days. Marvelous pianist. A short time later, we structured an album that was with Earl Hines, and then we moved forward slowly, issuing records by Earl, Marion, Bobby Henderson, and Willie the Lion Smith.
Wow.
And at some point, the early 70s, the partnership broke up for any number of reasons. And Sherman and I went on our own, and Marion went on her own. And we needed a label name because the label we had issued the records on originally was called Halcyon, which was Marion's name.
Right.
We were kicking around label names, and unhappily, Sherman Fairchild became ill and died.
Oh.
And Sherman had been the key ingredient in all of this because Sherman funded everything.
Right.
And
he also had the technological.
The technological thing was just a sideline. Sherman's real, since the early 1920s, Sherman had been on the board of a company his father had founded around the turn of the century that was called IBM.
Right.
And he was the largest holder at IBM. And it's another great big long story. But at any event, Sherman died, and through another series of interesting events and circumstances, I wound up with the company that I had to buy it back from the Fairchild estate, but it didn't cost very much because the estate determined that the purchase price would be whatever Sherman's initial capital investment was in the company, which was $500.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I wound up with 3 records and a record company and a bank account with $0 in it. And from 1972 forward, Chiaroscuro became, and it didn't even have a name originally, but it finally did. We called it Chiaroscuro. It was named after the concerts that Phyllis Condon had arranged for her husband Eddie in the 1930s, which were Chiaroscuro concerts. And
I never knew that.
And
I always thought it was named after the photographer, the lighting.
That was one aspect of it.
Right, but I never knew about the Eddie Condon.
Yeah, the concerts were in. She used to call them Chiaroscuro concerts, and it also was named after a dress shop in Greenwich Village that only sold black and white dresses called Chiaroscuro, and was also named after the Renaissance painting term that it referred to, because I was so poor, I could only afford to have black and white covers and this, that, and piano keyboards. I was so poor, I could only afford solo piano players. We played on black and white keys, and the pianos were black and white. I mean, it was Earl Roy the Lion and Don Yule and yourself and lots of others. And then it just moved forward. And starting in 1972 up through 2011, when the entire company was donated to National Public Radio and is maintained by an NPR station, WVIA in Pennsylvania. And there we are. It had about 200 titles, and the music ranges all the way from somebody as old as U.B. Blake, who was born sometime in the 1800s, all the way up through far more modern material, although the last records that we made were made in 2009 or something like that, 2010. And it's been a wonderful, interesting run. And the records are all still in print. They can be ordered and so forth. And occasionally a new one gets reissued. I was just told that a record that we made in 1977 is just being reissued as one of those 180-gram multi-vinyl LPs. Be coming out in the next minute or two.
Wow! And what title is that?
It's a record by a fusion artist that I made in 1977. His name is James Mason, a wonderful guitar player, and he made one record which is one of the more sampled jazz funk records of the late 1970s. And
Wow.
we did 2 or 3 jazz fusion records, actually more than that, maybe 5 or 6. And some of them remain extraordinarily popular
Mhm.
and had gone off the rails. If you could find a brand new copy of James's record still in a shrink wrap or something like that,
Mhm.
I mean, people had paid $1,000 for it. It
Right.
just got silly.
Wow. Yeah, it's very strange. When I was in college, I worked at a used record store up in Boston. A Blue Note, like a first pressing Blue Note of like Lee Morgan's Candy or Hank Mobley's Soul Station or something like that, you could pick up for the very dear price of $50 to $75
Yep.
back then.
Yeah.
And I was told that now they go all the time for $2,500.
Yeah. It's just amazing. And
Um,
hooray for that. The deep
yeah,
ones, the ones that were, as you say, first pressing.
yeah. What led you into? I mean, you were working for the government, as we said before, but was it just your love of music, or how did you gravitate towards the style of music that you liked and the piano players that you liked? What led you to all that?
Well,
Did you listen to a lot of that? Growing up in your house, was it musical? Or?
my house was very musical, but it was all classics. Uh,
Mhm.
my father was, Beethoven and Brahms and Bach and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
My mother loved operetta and
Mhm.
liked classics. There was no jazz in the house whatsoever, except for one record. And the one record was a mistake because back in the 30s, my mom had loved a movie that Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald made called Rosemarie. And one of the songs in Rosemarie was Indian Love Call. And she went
Okay.
to the local record store in East Texas and asked for a copy of Indian Love Call, and the clerk sold it to her. And she brought it home and didn't like it much because it certainly wasn't Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald. It was
Uh-huh.
Tony Pastor singing with Artie Shaw. And got
Ah,
that
okay.
record was because it was on the other side of Begin to Begin. It's record of 1939 or something like that.
Right.
And sometime in the early 50s, when I was playing my parents' classical records on the old Victrola that we had, uh,
Mhm.
I said, I wonder what this record is. And I put it on and I said, this is pretty good. And I started really getting interested in music. And that year, which would have been about, I guess, 53, 54, my parents bought me a little portable record player and 2 records, 245 records. And the 245 records were, one was by Rosie Clooney, and the other one was by the McGuire Sisters. And the McGuire Sisters song was Muskrat Ramble. If you
Sure.
imagine them singing
Right.
that. Anyway, and, fast forward 25 years and I got to know Phyllis McGuire, which is sort of, and it's,
That's true. Yeah.
and actually, she lived out in your neighborhood forever.
Yes, she did. She did. When I first got out here, I was supposed to go to her house for an event, and then she didn't feel well and canceled it. But I've had a couple of near misses. Not near misses, but misses with great Las Vegas legends. The first year I came out here, I was supposed to. One of the women that worked at Soundtrack, the studio, had left Soundtrack to take a job as James Caan's personal assistant. And James Caan was in town in 1999 filming a movie. And they were out here, and she called us and said, would we like to go to Stephen Eady's house for New Year's Eve, for the Millennium New Year's Eve? And I thought that would be the most Las Vegas thing to do in the world on my first New Year's Eve in Las Vegas. Then, unfortunately, at the last minute, at about 4 o'clock on New Year's Eve, she called and said, yeah, Jimmy's not going. He's getting a cold. He doesn't want to go. So we didn't get to go see Stephen Eady. But well, your story of the guy selling Benny Goodman, the Artie Shaw record to your mom, it reminded me of a great story. There's a wonderful saxophone player in Boston who's very not he's his name is Alan Chase. I don't know if you've ever heard the name, but he teaches at New England Conservatory. He taught at Berklee College of Music when I was there. He looked very much like your favorite physics teacher. He was a slight little guy with big glasses and blonde hair, and looked like he just stepped out of a cornfield. He would pick up the saxophone and play the most aggressive, outrageous, third stream stuff you could ever imagine. And we got to be friends, and he could play straight ahead stuff too. And we were playing a gig one night, and I said, I've got to ask, what happened to you? How did you become this kind of a musician, And he said, well, when I was 11 years old, I wanted to learn the saxophone, and my mother went to the record store up in wherever he was from, Iowa or someplace, and said to the guy behind the counter, my son is 11 years old and he wants to learn the saxophone. What should I play for him? And he sold her a copy of John Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders live in Seattle.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So he said that was my early, he didn't. So I don't know if we blame the kid behind the counter for being a wise ass or if we thank him for opening his ears at a young age. But it was really a funny story.
That's great.
But you were in New York. You went to Syracuse, right? You went to Syracuse University?
Well, yeah. Well, I lived in Syracuse.
Okay. Oh, your parents moved there?
Oh, yeah. My father was a school administrator, and he gave the speech when I graduated from what do they call it? The commencement address at high school when I graduated. He was the assistant superintendent of schools of Syracuse, New York. So I went to high school there, and I wound up going to college there. And it wasn't much of a jazz city, at least then. Right. There were people who liked records, and I had started, prowling all the old used junk stores and places looking for old 78s. Because in 1955, there weren't all these reissued. I mean, today there's not a song in the world you can't find on YouTube or reissued or something.
Sure.
Back in those days, if you wanted even a Duke Ellington or a Louis Armstrong, you had to find one. I mean, we had stores, but the discount record store only stocked pretty much Columbia's and maybe RCA. You'd have a hard time finding a Riverside or a Blue Note or anything like that. They had ordered in. I ordered in records. I would save my money and get together $10 and order, 2 or 3 records from King Carroll in New York or something like that.
Wow.
And I still have every single one of those records, those LPs. I never got rid of any of them. And I mean,
good.
The Columbia Record Club, you would send them $3 or something, and they would send you 3 records, and you had to buy 2 or 3 for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And
I was there. I was up by the time my age in the 70s, it was 10 records for 99 cents
or something. Yeah.
And then you had to buy a few more over the year. But even as a kid, even in Buffalo, which was of course not a major metropolitan area, but in Buffalo, I remember going to Cavage's record store and having the special order like Oscar Peterson records that I wanted. They didn't stock them in the store, but not until Record Theater opened up in Buffalo, which was like a Tower Records level of record store, and you could find everything. And the day, I mean, how many hours did we spend in Tower Records over the years?
Lots.
Countless.
And one thing that was a real blessing, at least as far as I'm concerned, you're talking about your pal who was given the Albert Ayler and John Coltrane record, or Pharoah Sanders or what.
Yeah.
I remember because I was a kid. I was 15 years old, and to me, a couple of bucks was a lot in 1955. Sure. And I remember I bought a record that was called I Like Jazz. It was a Columbia sampler, and it started out with ragtime.
Right.
But it went through the years and wound up with Dave Brubeck and Pete Rugolo on the other side. and in between,
Wow.
Dick Spiderbeck and Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and so forth. And
I remember that record.
yeah, and the advantage to it, Mike, was that when I heard my first records, I heard ragtime at the same time I heard Dave Brubeck. So
Right.
it never occurred to me, because I was so inexperienced and so forth, that there was a great time. So it was all wonderful, every bit of it. Ragtime wasn't old timey; it was just a little different than Dave Brubeck, and
Right.
so I learned to like it all at the same time, and it's
Ah.
still that way today. I mean,
It's so important. I mean, you don't compartmentalize. Oh, I mean, you don't go hearing bebop and saying, "Oh, swing is old now."
Yeah.
The way that they did that.
It's-
If you hear them side by side, it's all great.
yeah,
And it's a
and it is
um,
great.
yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I even go farther than that because I'm a child of the 70s. When I was in high school, I was listening to Art Tatum and I was listening to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And they're right side by, and my brother, who, you've met many times, he didn't really, I mean, we grew up with 2-player pianos in my house, and we grew up with my dad liking Sinatra, and, he loved all the big band stuff, but he wasn't much of a bopper, my dad. But my brother, when he was in his late teens, God started getting into the music, and he bought the Len Lyons 101 jazz album book, and he just bought every record in the book and listened to it and learned about it, and became really a good listener. But yeah, that's a wonderful way to experience it. I remember we had a Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo teaches jazz record when I was growing up, and it was amazing. It had Cab Calloway doing Minnie the Moocher, and it was just, yeah. I think that's what's missing a lot today, is especially with these playlists and everything is available, as you said, but there's nobody minding the store. You know what I mean? There's nobody putting it in order, putting it out for a consumer to easily find. If you know what you're looking for, it's wonderful. But if you just want to experience things, like how many records did I buy, and probably you, that you didn't really know who the person was, but you loved the cover and you bought it home to see what it was,
Sure, certainly.
That doesn't happen if you're on Apple Music and you're just looking for a record, that you want. And I miss the store. I miss Tower Records.
If you can go into a store and physically touch something, we're very lucky. We have a store up on 18th Street that still stocks lots of LPs. And as a matter of fact, we now have in New York City, right up on 6th Avenue in Rockefeller Center, we have a branch of Rough Trade that only has vinyl.
Wow.
They don't even have, they have maybe 10 CDs, but it's all vinyl.
Right.
And
it's amazing
how it's all coming back.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that the first record, I think the first Chiaroscuro record I bought, it was probably in the early 1980s. I think it may have been 1981 or 82, when I was at Berkeley. My first year at Berkeley, I called my dad and said, everyone's talking about this piano player named Dave McKenna, and he plays at the Copley Plaza Hotel. Now, coming from Buffalo and being, middle class, at most, the Copley Plaza was one of the most opulent places I had ever set foot in. And I had my one good sport coat that I'd taken to college with me. And a bunch of us went over, and I saw Dave, and I was just bowled over. And the next day went out to Looney Tunes or some record store in Boston and bought the record that's hanging behind you, of the Dave record where he was wearing the Red Sox.
Oh, that's a good one.
And yeah, that's an understatement. And it just changed my life. I mean, everything, the whole style that I try to play is trying to keep what Dave did going. But I said, this is a cool record label. I got to find more stuff on this label. And then I got the Bobby Hackett records. And my dad, of course, loved them all. And I was buying 2 copies and sending one back to Buffalo to my dad. And then,
You're the one who bought all those copies.
yeah,
Two of them.
all 2 of them. I'm my biggest fan. But and then so I went through Berkeley, and then when I got out of Berkeley, you know him very well, John Keel, had walked into when I was playing at the Harvard Bookstore Cafe, and we developed a relationship, and I started doing a lot of studio work for him. He said we should try to get you on a record label or something. And I somehow got the connection with a guy named Frank, and I forget his last name. I think his first name was Frank, and he was the A&R guy for Concord Records. We made a tape at Soundtrack, and I sent it to him. This was, way before internet or computer or any of that stuff. We sent him a cassette tape, and he sent me a letter back saying, thank you for the tape. I think somehow I had a connection to get it to him other than that they would have just thrown it in the garbage, because they didn't accept unsolicited material. About a month went by, and I called him and I said, I sent you that tape. He said, oh yeah, I play it in my car all the time. And I said, oh, and I thought, boy, can I get on to Concord Records? And he said, yeah, he said, I love your playing, but we already got Dave McKenna, so we don't need somebody that sounds like Dave McKenna. And I said, oh. So I thought to myself, well, Dave used to be on Chiaroscuro Records. Maybe they want a piano player. And that's how John and I went to you.
I didn't know that it was like that. That's wonderful. And then you made the first CD.
Came out in 1993, so 32 years ago. It was what I love most about recording with you and for the company was that you have this kind of really relaxed sense of what you're doing, and you assume that I know what I'm doing, for better or worse. And you let us do it. And we all sort of do what we're good at. John was good at recording the stuff. You were good at producing it. And I was hopefully good enough to play it, but there was never this kind of overt, I'm bringing in 4 songs. I want you to do them for this session,
Exactly.
And I really loved that because it let me do whatever I wanted to do.
Well, you see, the reason for that was a couple of things. One was sort of the way that I had watched John Hanlon and George Ava. I mean, and the very first record that I made in New York that I was pretty much in charge of was with Earl Hines. And I wouldn't presume to tell him what to do.
Right.
And I mean, if you have the confidence that you want to record Earl Hines or Mike Jones, you assume that they know what to do.
Right.
And with Earl, the idea was to, recreate the QRS records any way he wanted to. And he did.
Mm-hmm. And he did. And it really led to a resurgence in his career.
Yeah, he made 80 gazillion records. Ultimately, he's about the only person on the label. And of course, all of this was done in the 70s. But I think there were more Earl Hines chiaroscuros. He was on about a dozen different titles. But the only person who is close to that is you. I mean, you're on 5 CDs that are your own. Starting with that one, the Look at Me Now CD that Joey Bushkin wrote the notes. I mean,
that's right.
The thing that's crazy about the records you wound up making for the company is that you had records that had covers by John DeVries, who did that McKenna baseball cover.
Right.
You had records that had covers by Paul Bacon.
Yeah.
And most of yours had Paul Bacon covers, and or at least things that he designed. And he also wrote liner notes for you. You had people writing liner. I mean, who else would have liner notes from people as diverse as Joe Bushkin and Penn Jillette? No.
It's true.
Or Neil Tisser.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the place. And it's
I still remember going up to Newburyport to have Elizabeth Bennett.
Yeah, she did the drawing.
Yeah.
Remember the first one that she did for us. It shows you how crazy it was at Chiaroscuro, because she did a drawing of Hamlet Blewett.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
on the front of his truck. And she did this beautiful, beautiful drawing of him, and, soft pastels and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What was funny, at the time, Hamlet was a little bit out there. He wasn't exactly Zoot Sims or Tate. And I remember him looking at it when I got it back, and he said, no, we can't use this. This is it. It was much too soft and pretty. And but then his wife saw it. It's still, Hamlet died. I don't know whether she did or not, but I wound up giving that to them because she wanted it on the wall and she wanted it on the record. She was in charge. And
wow. Oh, sure.
So, think about it from that standpoint. I know. The way from Hamlet Blewett to you, and that Elizabeth did. So
I'm trying to remember. That was, I don't remember what year that was, but it must have been probably in the maybe 96 or.
We made the record in 94, in December of 94. So that means it came out in 95.
Okay. All right. But, well, now to change track a little bit, when did you decide to go into the cruise idea? You were the first one to do a jazz cruise, right? The Floating Jazz Festival was
in the second incarnation. You're absolutely right, but there had been 2 or 3 done in the early, like 1971, but they weren't. But not. They didn't take over the whole ship. They basically, had 2 or 3 jazz bands on. We had been approached by Norwegian. We were first approached by the advertising people who were handling everything for Norwegian Caribbean Line, because they had a big ship called the SS Norway, which was the old SS France. They converted it into, they had taken out one of the motors. This was a transatlantic ocean liner, and they had taken out one of the motors to make it less expensive to run. And it was doing cruises in the Caribbean. And they were having absolute fits filling up the ship during hurricane season. So they said, let's see if we can find something that might draw people on. That was their advertising company. And the advertising company came to us. We put together on literally a moment's notice a cruise for the Caribbean in the fall of 1983, actually October of 83. And it more or less worked. They came back to us the following, 2 or 3 months after the cruise came in, and said, why don't we do it for real with bigger budgets so you can hire more people? And so for 1984. And that was the beginning of it. And we did that all the way through 2002. We did it for 20 years.
Right.
And it wasn't just the jazz cruise. By the late 80s, it had morphed into a big band cruise where we had, mostly ghost bands, Lynn Miller and Harry James and Tommy Dorsey and things like that. But always with, Ray Anthony would be on leading a band, or Ray McKinley or Erskine Hawkins or Tex Beneke or whoever who was still doing that kind of thing. And then in the early 90s, we added blues to it. And so an annual, sometimes 2 annual blues cruises, which was a little harder because it was more electric blues than old country, because by that time, most of the old acoustic country guys had died. But I mean, it was wonderful. You know, it was Bobby Rush and Chuck Berry and Bruce Brown and Jake Mount.
Oh, I bet Chuck Berry was easy to work with.
Oh, actually, he was. He
really?
And what would knock your socks off? I remember the first rehearsal. Chuck only traveled with a bass player. We had to supply all the rest of the musicians. And we hired a young piano player from Philadelphia to be the pianist. And that first rehearsal, Chuck comes in and this young, 25-year-old is sitting at the piano. And he sort of is gruff and says, well, which one of my tunes do you know? And he said, I know them all, sir. And he said, oh, you don't. How could you know all my songs? He says, I've written 185 songs. I know them all, sir. And strangely enough, at the end of Chuck's last show, he was so happy and doing this and that. He came duck walking over to me and he said, hey, boss man, what would you like to hear? And I
really
played Baby Doll. And he said, gee, I don't know if I know that one. And I pointed at the piano player and I said, he does.
Yes. That's great.
It was great. Chuck was actually a lot of fun. He was
wow, that's a wonderful story. I'm glad I asked because I just would have assumed.
It was fun. And
yeah.
But I mean, he came on for 5 or 6, 7 days, whatever it was, carrying nothing but a guitar case and a little briefcase that was, 18 inches by 60 inches. No steamer trunks or anything.
I've heard stories from other musicians over the years that he could be a little bit surly.
Yep.
And it's nice to hear an actual good story about him. Well, yeah, I remember on one of the cruises with when Jimmy Witherspoon was on, you wisely somehow, I'm sure you didn't do it, but somehow we wound up eating our meals with him at the same table and became very, very good friends, very friendly.
But it was wonderful mixing everybody up that way. And
oh, it really was. I mean, and like you said, when you're sitting at dinner and saying, well, do I want to go see Jerry Mulligan tonight, or do I want to wait until tomorrow night and see somebody, and see Clark Terry tonight, and I mean, it was all the way you programmed everything was so great because there was always an opportunity to see there was never a date there where you were going to have to say, well, if I don't see him, I can't, if I do see him, I can't see him, and everything was the way everything was organized.
Well, we tried to do it so that not only did the passengers have generally 4 different opportunities throughout the week to see something, but the musicians had 3 nights off so they could go see somebody too. And then sometimes, I mean, the one that I really, really, really missed, it was one night very late. It was hard keeping up with everything. And I was only told about this. I never saw it. One night, like 2:30 in the morning, in one of the lounges, on the week that Sarah Vaughan was on, there was a trio playing in one of the lounges that they kept open. And the trio was Sarah on piano, George Mraz on bass, but he had one drink too many, so he was lying down as he played. And Joe Williams on drums.
Wow.
And apparently it was very good.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sarah Vaughan could play the piano.
Yeah.
Wow. It's, yeah, I mean, so many great moments happened on those. And it's by the time it sort of came to an end, many of the people had passed on. You know what I mean? Many of the performers that were so great.
It was possible in 1991 or something to simply call up Dizzy Gillespie and say, hey, you want to take a boat ride at your birthday time? And he would say, yeah, same as last year. Yeah. And same as last year was $10,000 in cash. And you didn't have to negotiate or anything like that. And that was that.
Right.
When it got to the point that probably today, if you wanted certain people, it would be $120,000 or something for a week.
Oh, sure.
And
But I mean, also they were around to do
oh
it
yeah,
and willing to do it.
because we left
You know?
their wives or their girlfriends or what.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was
And
example, Mike, that you probably don't know this story. We wanted to use the modern jazz quartet,
mhm.
and Shelley called whoever was handling MJQ at the time. I don't know who it was. We didn't have enormous budgets. She was basically laughed out of the room, and I didn't like that. So what I did, I called Milt's wife, Sandy Jackson, and said, "Hey, Sandy, you want to take a boat ride?" It's like, and Sandy put it together. And so the whole MJQ with their wives came out and played, 4 concerts. And as it turned out, it was the very last time they all played together because
No kidding.
a month later, Connie died.
Right.
And
Wow.
it was all, they wanted to have a nice, relaxing. There were 3 people that fell into that category. The very last time Jerry Mulligan played was not on one of them, and the very last time Dexter played.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So,
Well, that's, yeah. I mean, it was a wonderful, it was, hey, come on this ship for a week and be treated like royalty and play great, play,
should be. That's
play a couple of gigs, go see the greatest musicians in the world, eat like a pig, and it was just, and it was like, oh, and you're going to pay me for it on top of it? Okay. And I mean, I don't know, I've been told lovely stories about the jazz cruise that happens nowadays, but I don't believe that I'm a big enough name for them to be interested. But there are enough jazz fans now that they're actually starting to add some more dates to that. I guess Christian McBride is going to do his own jazz cruise, and somebody, in addition to the jazz cruise, whatever they call it. So I think maybe maybe cruising is going to start making a comeback for jazz musicians.
Well, maybe that then. But what you see is, for example, the town where I grew up in, at Syracuse, New York, they have an enormous jazz festival now. I mean, when I grew up there in Syracuse, I was there for junior high school, and 3 years of college. I could count if I had both my hands open, the number of people who came through in that 10-year period. I mean, the Birdland Stars on tour would come 1 year. I'm sure I actually saw Stan Getz once. I snuck into a bar. And I remember there was a series that was put on at my high school where I actually saw the Jerry Mulligan Concert Jazz Band once.
Wow.
But you didn't get to see anything. Now they have a jazz festival that, it's a big free festival. It's a major.
Sure. The year before the pandemic, so 2019, I think it was, I went up to Lewiston, New York, and played a festival up there by north of Niagara Falls.
Is it?
And it was packed.
Yeah.
I mean, the streets were full. So yeah, I agree. But what you did was, I mean, it was incredibly special. And it was also, I was trying to allude to the fact that you managed to give these guys that were many of them in their 70s and 80s and, sometimes older, I think, a chance to relax and play great gigs and have fun. And it was such a wonderful experience. I mean, I think about it all the time. I really do. I remember specific moments of some of the different cruises that, you're never gonna. Well, it was once in a lifetime.